Chris Kluwe was, of course, cut by the Minnesota Vikings. He was then picked up by the Oakland Raiders, but that certainly did not work out as well. Basically, as we all know, Chris Kluwe has become this vocal leader in the NFL for gay rights and same-sex marriage. And he put out a report via Deadspin about a few people that he calls cowards, and basically draws them out.
2 cowards and 1 bigot.
1 bigot, and the bigot is the special teams coach.
But most importantly, what he says is that his career was cut short because of his stance on gay rights issues.
Correct. Even though the PR department tried to limit the amount of media interviews that he did, they basically held him out from all those interviews. And then later in the day, he found 3 or 4 media inquiries that basically were submitted about 4 to 6 days previously. Here are a few quotes, by the way, from Chris Kluwe's piece on Deadspin. It's a fantastic piece. I recommend you read it. Link is in the description below. He did. Okay. He did. So after the Emmett C. Burns letter, and we booked him on TYT Sports. Cenk had a fantastic interview with him.
What's the Emmett C. Burns letter?
Where he called Emmett C. Burns, just because a Maryland governor, I believe. And he wrote basically to Emmett C. Burns saying, you don't have to hate on gay people. You're not just going to love cock if you end up liking and giving them the same rights. It's also another fantastic piece. Here's what he said to Emmett C. Burns, or after the Emmett C. Burns letter. You, quote, from Les Frazier, needed to be quiet and stop speaking out on this stuff. Leslie Frazier saying that to Chris Kluwe. Kluwe's response, one of his main coaching points to us was to be, quote, good men and to, quote, do the right thing. Leslie Frazier's response back to Chris Kluwe in their meeting, a wise coach once told me there are 2 things you don't talk about in the NFL, politics and religion. So then I told you about the head of PR, Bob Hagan, who did not forward media requests. Now this is where it gets interesting with the special teams coordinator, Mike Priefer. September, October, November, December, he used homophobic language, something that Chris Kluwe said in this piece he never did. Never did before. And obviously with Chris Kluwe being the vocal leader of the NFL with same-sex marriage. And then Priefer said to him, you still defending the gays? That's one of the many things. And then he said to Kluwe, you're going to burn in hell. And then he tries to say, Jesus Christ is the Lord and Savior in a half-joking tone, Kluwe notes. And in a meeting, he also said to Kluwe, to all the special teamers, we should round up all the gays, send them to an island, and then nuke it until it glows. And then he just sort of ignored Chris Kluwe. Lastly, and then I'll get into your take, GM Rick Spielman told him stop tweeting about the Pope when all that occurred this past year. And then, as you noted, they drafted a punter in the 5th round. And here's what Chris Kluwe, and they said it was all based on, quote, competition. And here's what Chris Kluwe wrote in closing. Thank you for taking the time to read my story. Never be afraid to do what's right. If no one ever says anything, nothing ever changes. I love that at the end.
Yeah, well, of course, we don't know what happened. And Chris Kluwe didn't do himself any great favors by not sort of by declaring definitively that his performance, that his release was due to his outspoken nature on gay issues. We don't know. I checked out the stats just to, back in my day, Richard. If you punted for 40 yards, it was good. Like 40, 42 with a net of 37.
Yeah, and back in the day, if you had under a 4 ERA, you were in Major League Baseball.
Well, now it's but what's remarkable is that now you look and they're like in 2012, Chris Kluwe's last year with the Vikings, the guy who led the league in punting averaged 50 yards a punt.
That's incredible.
50. Chris Kluwe was 45.7 the year he was released. That's not top 10.
And he also said that because of Mike Priefer telling him, our coverage team sucks. That's an actual quote. Our coverage team sucks. Get the ball higher. Have more hang time.
Lose a couple yards.
Lose a couple yards off your statistics. And Kluwe was like, look, I've learned, for the greater of the team, for the better of the team, I'll do that.
Right, I imagine. Yeah. So now I don't know that. And obviously punters' success is not merely measured on yards. If you're kicking 50-yard line drives every time, you guys are going to get some balls run back on you. That's not what you want. But
sure.
But he was replaced by a guy, Jeff Locke. Both of them went to UCLA, who averaged a few less. Anyway, his numbers were right in the middle of the league. He was a reasonable punter, and since we don't have stats on hang time, I don't know whether he was particularly good at that. He certainly wasn't failing as a punter.
No, not at all.
That's clear. So we don't know. And I get what Leslie Frazier said. Like, that's a reasonable thing to say. Hey, let's not talk about sports or a religion or politics. Let's just cool it down on that. However, in a time in the country when gay rights is becoming an issue and the outward aggressive homophobia of professional athletes is an issue, a real issue, Chris Kluwe was doing something important, and you referenced he was a Maryland State legislator, Emmett C. Burns, who wrote to the Ravens owner when Iambedejo came out. So Kluwe was responding to that. So he'd been aggressive in that nature, and in hindsight, what the Vikings should have done is said, hey, look, Chris Kluwe gets to say whatever he said, and silencing him in a way is cowardly. Not Leslie Frazier and the GM not understanding that this was an important issue, and that it was an important issue because people in football don't talk about this stuff.
Right.
So it mattered that what Iambedejo and Kluwe were doing. So in that sense, it was cowardly. But to presume that they cut him for that is a pretty big leap.
Why?
I mean, first of all, it might be true because we just don't know.
Wasn't that your initial reaction though when they cut him? You were like, "Oh, well, they had to have cut him because he's this outspoken." I mean, that was my initial reaction.
Well, keep in mind that he then got another chance with another team,
with the Raiders,
who then ended up taking a punter, Marquette King, right? Who I think he averaged nearly 50 yards a kick this year. So I mean, he got beat out by a guy who kicked the hell out of him.
Did he go to Marquette?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But he lost out to a guy who outpunted him.
Mm-hmm.
But that said, Kluwe looks like he's probably one of the best 32 punters in the league. There's probably a job for him.
He's probably middle of the pack, I would say.
By the way, when you have an okay punter, spending your 5th round draft choice on a punter,
odd.
That's what makes the GM a coward. Like that's a
Rick Spielman.
That's right. It's Spielman. Yeah, it's a terrible draft choice. I didn't really.
Well, maybe that's just like, hey, by the way, fuck you. We're not keeping you. We're taking a punter. This is like the most blatant way of saying that.
It seems like the Vikings didn't want it. What is very clear, whether they cut Kluwe because of he was being outspoken, they were not eager to deal with this. The rejected media requests and Frazier telling him, hey, I'm not telling you what to believe, but let's just cool down the politics talk on this sort of political hot button issue. That makes it clear the Vikings did not want to deal with this one. What they should have said was, hey, we're proud of Chris Kluwe for speaking his mind. We're going to mostly focus on football here, but that said.
Right. Well, they told him when he went to events, when he went to banquets and he spoke, you're a private citizen. You're not speaking on behalf of the Minnesota Vikings. That's something that they told him to do over and over and over again, and certainly that's what he followed,
sure.
And he understood that. But here's the interesting point to me, Ben, is that he notes in this article, Ziggy Wolf said to him, I love what you're doing, Chris. Keep speaking your mind. I just came from my son's friend's wedding where there are 2 gay males who just got married, and it was beautiful. So keep speaking your mind. And that's what sort of was interesting to me, because the owner has his back, yet the owner couldn't get in the GM's ear and Leslie Frazier's ear and the special teams coordinator.
That little piece of information suggests that their decision to release him was made for football reasons. And he got some significant, Frazier and Spielman and the special teams coach got some significant backing after Kluwe's piece came out.
Who did?
All 3 of those guys got from Blair Walsh, the kicker of the Vikings, who was a rookie in Kluwe's last year, and they obviously worked together, and Kluwe held for him, for Blair Walsh, and he was very clear, saying that these are all 3 good men. I never saw anything like that at all, and he said that the actions that Kluwe took to suggest that you were released for these personal reasons, because of bigotry among these 3, Blair Walsh said that was reprehensible. And had these guys back. Now, I don't know. I have no clue what Blair Walsh's politics are. It would be interesting to see.
I guess that would be interesting. By the way, Mike Priefer's response to all this through a lawyer-written statement. I want to be clear that I do not tolerate discrimination of any type, and am respectful of all individuals. I personally have gay family members who I love and support, just as I do any family member.
Let me read you Blair Walsh. I've been a member of the Vikings for 2 years. I want to start by saying I have the utmost respect for Rick Spielman, Leslie Frazier, and Mike Priefer, all 3 good men. I've had countless conversations and interactions with Coach Priefer, and I can personally attest to his integrity and character. His professionalism in the workplace is commonplace, says Walsh, I firmly believe my teammates would wholeheartedly agree with that. The allegations made today are reprehensible, not compatible with what Mike Priefer stands for. As we all know, in the NFL, you must perform at the highest level, meet the expectations of your coaches, management, teammates. If these expectations based upon past performance and future potential for excellence are not met, your NFL career with that team is over. I believe this was the case with Chris, and it is unfair to think his release was anything other than football related.
Was this in an interview or was this a statement?
This reads like a statement because the grammar's shitty. There's a lot of commas that don't like. If these expectations, comma, that makes sense, based upon past performance, future potential for excellence, comma, are not met, comma, your NFL career with that team, comma, is over.
Mike just said what?
Yeah, I believe this was the case with Chris, comma, and it's unfair to think. So there's a, and if you, yeah.
You believe, at least I do, I personally do believe that they did not want this sort of outspoken player on their team to represent their team. I mean, when anyone opens an interview, they say we're joined by Minnesota Vikings punter Chris Kluwe. Yeah, that'll always come with the territory.
Yeah, but nobody thinks that they're 4 years. No one in the history of watching television has thought that a punter speaks for a team. Okay, so I don't think they don't have to worry about that, and they're panicking about it. And they should have supported Kluwe, and they should have taken it. They should have done what they should have embraced it in a way that if I'm not mistaken, that the Ravens did. But
how did the Ravens do it?
I mean, they didn't shut him up. Well, I guess he's not on the team anymore.
No, he's not. They let him go.
Yeah. So,
yeah, but I Am Adejo wasn't this outspoken.
But he didn't say that he was. Well, he was the first.
Writing it. I mean, writing it down like this.
So I don't know. I have no idea what's in the hearts of these guys. The allegations Kluwe made against Coach Priefer are very specific.
Yeah, they are. They are.
And he denies it today, as you said, and saying he's got a family member and that he would never say anything like that, and those are the right responses. The Vikings say these is the first time they've heard of these allegations, and they're going to investigate.
Meaning?
I don't know. They're going to investigate. They got to investigate it now.
Yeah, but what's actually going to turn up from their investigation?
What's probably going to turn up is they already fired Leslie Frazier. My hunch is they're going to fire Mike Priefer because...
Oh, you think they will?
Well, I don't know. Usually a new coach gets to hire his own guys, so he might have been getting fired.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
They can get out of this situation without taking a stand on it, which seems to me to be what the Vikings would like to do.
So you see where we stand. Thoughts, comments section below. We'd love to hear them.